Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I'm your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody has had a great start to their week. We've got a fun show planned for you. Going to be kind of all over the place, talk a little hoops, talk a little football. I'm going to get into the NFL's decision to allow the players to participate in Olympic flag football, kind of talk about some of the all-time great Rams who I think would have been good representatives. Obviously, a much different sport than tackle football when you take the physicality out of it. It's a completely different game, but we'll have some fun with that. I'm going to get into the concept of Mr. Nugget. Aaron Gordon obviously has really become a beloved player in Denver for a ton of reasons, but as good as he is, I think it's more about the guy he is and how he conducts himself and just kind of the way that he represents the organization. So I'm going to talk about like who would be CSU's version of that, both from a basketball standpoint and from a football standpoint. I'll give an example from this past season, but we'll give out a couple of guys over the last 15 years that I think would have kind of fit that mold. If you're rocking with us this morning and wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up in YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. Throw your comments in the Toyota chat. We'll get to as many as we can over the course of the show. Anything I don't get to immediately, we'll try and get to at the end. We're going to talk local recruiting. I feel like CSU men's basketball is doing a great job on that front. But I did just want to start here in the intro by shouting out the CSU men's track team. They were able to win the outdoor championship a couple of days ago. So they swept both the indoors and the outdoors this year. That program, all they do is win. Under Brian Bedard, his 26th combined championship, or the program's, I should say, 26th combined championship. Pretty incredible, the success that program is just continually able to have, and obviously doing great things. It's not something we focus a ton on this program for obvious reasons. It's just not going to move the needle in the same way, but they certainly make all of us proud, and we try and make sure we shout out the accomplishments of them as well. And a special shout out to Maya Lesner, who won her 4th straight Mountain West title in shot put. She is currently the number 1 shot put thrower, I guess you would say, or she's number 1 in shot put in the country, which is pretty incredible. And we've talked about it before, but I just think it's really neat how she's been able to establish her own incredible legacy. And it's tough when you're always in the shadow of your father, and every time that she goes viral online, it's because of SEO reasons, and you put Brock Lesnar's name in there. But I mean, what she's been able to do in her own right is pretty incredible, and she's going to go down as one of the all-time greats in a program that has had quite a few standouts over the years, and obviously, like we said, 26 combined championships, has had quite a bit of success. So I just wanted to make sure we shouted them out here at the beginning. I also wanted to shout out a couple of responses we got on Twitter last week. We visited the concept of the biggest villains of the Mountain West, and obviously it was from a CSU slant. It's from our perspective. We don't consider Trey McBride a villain, but I did have it pointed out to me that if you're talking about it from the other team's perspectives, you could probably throw guys out like Bradley Van Pelt, like Trey McBride, and I think they're good answers. I think they're fun answers, and I think they're kind of perfect examples of this topic, because what inspired it was Jamie Benn of the Dallas Stars, sucker punching Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets in the face while Scheifele was kind of engaged with the ref. Ben sucker punches him, drops him. And it was just classic Jamie Benn stuff, but it had me thinking of guys who are just pests, guys who, if they play for your team, you love them. If you play against them, you hate them. And I definitely think BVP and Trey McBride would fall under that category. BVP, obviously, the ultimate shit talker, delivered some of the greatest lines I've ever heard. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever going to have a better line than "That's the sorriest number 6 team I've ever seen," after beating CU in the O2 showdown. Trey McBride played with a very similar demeanor, the type of guy who's not only incredible and going to frustrate you from that standpoint as an opposing fan, because you know that you're not able to cover him. He was CSU's entire offense in 2021. I mean, you knew exactly where the ball was going, and he still put up whatever it was, like 100 catches and just insane production. But he was the kind of guy that wasn't just going to get a first down and drop the ball and not say anything to the defense. He was going to let them hear it a little bit. And occasionally he was going to pick up an unsportsmanlike conduct, or he was going to go a little past the line, maybe a little above and beyond and pick up an unnecessary roughness or something like that. But we love that mentality. We honestly, the fact that he got those every now and then, that was just a product of everything that we love about him and the mindset and the mentality with which he played. So I think you could throw those guys in, especially if you're just talking about, the biggest villains in Mountain West history. And then, from our standpoint, also got some great responses on Steve Addazio, who, just talk about one of the most unlikable coaches that's ever been in the conference, certainly at CSU. And his good buddy, Urban Meyer, who not only was basically directly responsible for the Steve Addazio debacle at CSU, he and Joyce McConnell really teamed up to drop the ball on that one. But just from the way he kind of carried himself when he was at Utah, ran the score up on Sonny a couple of times, which is just, I don't know, felt petty and unnecessary. Obviously, the guy has had a very successful football career. I think he's one of the all-time greatest, college football coaches, but the dude is just, for a lack of a term, such a D-bag. And I think that he certainly deserved a little bit more run in that conversation if we're talking biggest pricks. We talked plenty about Utah and BYU, but Urban Meyer probably deserves his own special chapter, and I guess you could kind of put Kyle Whittingham in there as well. Classically prickly and kind of just an unlikable personality, but he's never bugged me the same way that Urban has for whatever reason. I think what really makes Urban a particularly evil, or what makes him particularly easy to root against, is not only has he been kind of like a prick with the way that he conducts himself, he's very cocky, very sanctimonious. He's always just been a holier than thou guy. And especially considering what we know about him, nothing rubs me the wrong way more than that. The guy who, Urban is always going to be the first one to go on that Fox broadcast and have something to say about Jim Harbaugh or whatever coach might be in some mess with the NCAA. And it's just like, with all the skeletons that you've got in your closet, my guy, I don't know if you are the one to chime in on, what's best for the state of college football, what the right thing to do is, or anything like that. And I've never gotten to really interact with Urban in person to person. Obviously know plenty about him, but I'm not surprised that Steve Addazio and him were tight, just kind of based on what we know about him and the way that Steve Addazio carried himself, which was not great. I don't know if I've ever interviewed somebody who was just as big of a prick as Daz was. I don't want to go down too big of a rabbit hole and really, get the show out of a loop, but I wanted to touch on those. We've got a question here from Lamar in the Toyota chat, and then we'll get into some CSU basketball stuff. Of the UDFA guys, who do you think is in the best position to make a roster this upcoming season? My picks are Dom Jones and Jacob Gardner. I don't think Gardner is technically signed with the Colts. I know he got an opportunity in their rookie minicamp, so we'll see if he's able to make the most of that. I have been a little surprised how his post-draft process has played out, just given the experience and the versatility that he brings to the table. I don't think he tested incredibly well. I think Drew Moss athletically tested a little better. But I'm with you on Dom Jones. I've said that a couple of times now. For as much as we focus on, Henry Blackburn and Jack Howell and some of these other guys, I think Dom Jones, with his length, with his frame, with his ability to play press man coverage, I think he's got a nice opportunity to potentially play his way onto the roster in Cleveland there or elsewhere. I just think that he's got the prototypical, frame for what you're looking for. Big, lengthy guy. He's got a safety background as well, so that physicality doesn't bother him. And we really saw him kind of come into his own in terms of, his coverage skills and whatnot this past season. So I do think that Dom Jones has a really good chance to potentially make the roster in Cleveland or somewhere else. CD6 says, I like people who are villain in sports, but I have no time for people who are just bad humans. I'm with you. And I think that's an important distinction because there are some guys who are, maybe a little bit of a nuisance on the floor, on the court, on the ice, whatever, but they're not genuinely bad people in real life. And then there's people like Adazio and Urban Meyer who not only are pricks, but just also are rough to be around. And I'm with you. I don't mind a little bit of, having that attitude of going maybe a little bit above and beyond at times. I'm trying to think of an example like a Travis Kelce, a Trey McBride, who are, I think, good people in real life, but are maybe a little bit annoying to play against if you are an opposing fan, and they're awesome to have on your team if you are, their fan base. Lamar wants to know, do you think Horton will make the roster in Seattle post ACL injury? Yeah, I think Torrey will be on the roster week 1. That would surprise me if he didn't make the team for a couple of reasons. One, I just think his game translates at the next level. 2, I don't think there's a ton of veteran receivers that he's going to have to worry about in Seattle. I mean, I know they brought in Cooper Kupp. They drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba this past year. I just think it's a good spot, an opportunity where he should be able to play his way into pretty consistent reps. And, hopefully he's able to make a nice little career for himself out there in Seattle. There have been a couple of Rams, obviously, that have gone on to the NFL who had their moments. Richard had some moments with the Browns, and particularly when Baker Mayfield was there, always felt like he was kind of the victim of some roster politics to an extent, felt like he never really got a fair shake of things, and had things been a little bit different for him just in terms of stability with the franchise, who was GM, who was coach, they wouldn't have had so much of a mess there. I think there would have been a nice way for him to be a pretty consistent, like, number 3 receiver. Michael Gallup, for a variety of reasons, had some big moments with Dallas, but never really performed with the type of consistency I felt like he was capable of. Maybe, a change of scenery here, going and signing with the Commanders, will give him that opportunity. But I think Torrey potentially has a chance to have the highest ceiling of all of them. His age is a big factor in his favor. Like, he's a young 22 years old. I think he just turned 22 or is just about to turn 22, whatever it is. He's got his best years still ahead of him. I've seen him work out a couple of times, and it seems like he's moving just fine. Doesn't seem like there's, any long-term impact from that knee injury. So I think he's in a good spot, and I think he'll be just fine. And your last question here, last Rams football question, is Coach Norvell on the hot seat in 3rd year with BFN and a new AD in the building? There's added pressure. I've talked about that a lot. I think hot seat might be a little bit too intense of a way to phrase it, but I had Kevin Lytle on about a week and a half ago, and we kind of went in on this subject. If you missed it, recommend you go back and check that out at some point. But we framed this season as a make or break year for CSU football under Jay Norvell. And I don't think that's a hot take. I don't think that's, us coming on here and using hyperbole or anything like that, because frankly, he would already have a contract extension right now if it wasn't considered a make or break year. I mean, you look at what they accomplished this past year, beating a couple rivals, going to a bowl game, winning 8 games. I think if the admin was 100% sold on the program, Norvell would have already locked up a contract extension. And that's not to say that he can't do that this year, but I do think that it's kind of a prove it time for CSU right now under Jay Norvell. And I think with a 3rd-year starting quarterback, I think with the guys they've been able to add through the portal, there will be relatively high expectations for the team this year. And, I think really you got to do what you did last year and then some, or it's probably going to feel pretty underwhelming. But love the questions. Keep them coming in the Toyota chat. Again, we'll get to as many as we can over the course of the show. If I don't respond immediately, I'll try and come back to it at the end. We're going to take a quick break here, though, and then we're going to get into some CSU basketball talk and talk about local recruiting specifically. All right. First things first, we're going to shout out our friends at First Bank, whether on the road, at home, or somewhere in between. First Bank makes banking easy, convenient, and secure. Their mobile banking app allows you to check balances, pay friends, Plus, you can manage your money anytime, anywhere. Here's the best part, though. If you open a new First Bank checking account, you could earn $300. First Bank is all about helping you stay on track. Their tools make it simple to stay in control of your finances without the hassle. No matter where life takes you, First Bank gives you the freedom to bank how and when it works best for you. So if you're ready for better banking and the chance to earn a little extra, head to efirstbank.com/bonus. That's efirstbank.com/bonus to open your account. Bank how you want, when you want, with First Bank. Certain restrictions and requirements to apply. Member FDIC. I also want to talk to you guys about Lucy Nicotine. It's a great way to up your nicotine routine. Lucy Nicotine is 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Lucy Breakers are nicotine pouches with a little extra surprise. If you are a pouch man like myself, you will know that occasionally, from a textural standpoint, it can be a little bit like chewing on a straw wrapper or something like that. And what's awesome about the breakers is with that little bit of fluid that comes out, it just provides a little bit of hydration, keeps the flavor nice and strong, and again, it just helps so much from a textural standpoint. I'm a big mango guy. Those are my favorite personally, but you can't go wrong with cinnamon. You can't go wrong with just like a basic mint. Level up your nicotine routine with Lucy. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. If you use the promo code DNVR, you can get 20% off your first order. That's saving you big bucks these days. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co. Use the code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print, y'all. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. All right, we are going to get into some CSU hoops talk here, but we will talk more football later on in the show. Again, keep these comments, questions rolling in the Toyota chat, and I will get to as many as I can. I did have a couple of topics here that I wanted to touch on before we stray too far, I guess I should say, from the rundown that I've got planned for you. And I just wanted to briefly talk local recruiting, specifically on the basketball side. I've seen it referenced now by a couple of people with deep ties on the AAU side. Some high school basketball coaches, they've had great praise for Ali Farokhmanesh, as well as this entire staff, for the effort that they are making when it comes to local recruiting. Local recruiting has always been an uphill battle for CSU basketball, even more of a struggle, I would say, than football, for a variety of reasons. I mean, first of all, there's not a ton of D1 starters that are historically coming out of the state. I will say that high school basketball is improving a lot like high school football in this state. There's been a lot more investment in it, and I think we're kind of reaping the benefit of that. And that's not to say that there haven't been talented players to come out of Colorado. I mean, Jason Smith, Colorado kid, like it does happen, but it hasn't been a huge feeder option for CSU. Like, you look back at the last 15 years or so, Adam Thistlewood obviously had a really great career at CSU, was a big part of laying the foundation early on under Nico Medved. And there have been guys, but when you look at some of the stars like that have come out of state, or some of the more impactful players, they haven't really picked CSU out of high school. The Rams have been able to land some of these guys the second time around through the portal. Obviously, Neat Clifford's a great example of that. They were able to get, a couple years ago, you're able to get Scott, which was great. And especially considering his older brother played at CU, I felt like that was a nice pull for the Rams. CU kind of tried to come in on him late, but at that point, I think his heart was pretty set on, coming to CSU and playing with Isaiah specifically. But it's been a struggle for CSU when it comes to landing these guys out of high school. Basically, everybody that CSU has gone head-to-head with CU or New Mexico when it comes to, basketball recruiting in the last 10 years or so, if it's come down to those two, CSU has been the second choice every single time. There's a couple of reasons. I think, when Medved and those guys first came in, it was not coming off of a great time period for the program. Late in the U Stacy era, it was kind of a disaster. And on top of that, you had to overcome over a half decade's worth of incompetence from that U Stacy staff when it comes to recruiting. I mean, they made no effort whatsoever to recruit anywhere, but not even in Colorado, like not even in their backyard. And we saw people like Josh Adams, go on to go to Wyoming and really, come back to bust CSU's ass. And, Medved and Ali, they had an uphill climb when it came to mending some of those relationships with some of the significant programs around the state, getting those coaches in your corner again. I felt like early on in the Medved era, there was a fairly significant effort to recruit Colorado and to try and, establish those ties and those roots. This is me speaking for the staff. Maybe Ali would have a different opinion. I felt like after 2 or 3 years, there was maybe some frustration there from Medved, the fact that they weren't landing some of these kids. And he just kind of decided, you want to know what, screw it. I can land comparable talent from the Midwest. I have so many ties out there. We'll just focus on that. And it obviously worked out really well for CSU. And the Midwest historically has always been a great feeder for CSU basketball. And I think it will continue to be with Ali, who's obviously got those deep roots himself, having played at Northern Iowa and everything that goes along with that. He coached at Nebraska a little bit too, and Drake. But I do feel like we are seeing, going into the first year under Ali Farouk-Manesh, an effort by him to really lean into Colorado recruiting again. And some of that probably has to do with the increased talent pool. Again, I do think there are more D1 hoopers coming out of the state than there were previously, but I also think he understands that the foundation, the tone that he sets right now when it comes to local recruiting, even if you don't necessarily land a couple of these guys, and we will talk about a couple of local kids that CSU has offered, that could come back to, serve you well later on down the road. Again, so much of this is just about establishing relationships. And, a big key is being early on some of these guys. You don't want to be the local school that didn't even have the time of day for somebody, and now all of a sudden, a couple of big schools are interested, and then CSU and CU comes in. That's never worked out well for CSU in basketball or football. If you are going to land the talented kids locally, you've got to be able to identify them early on in the process, start establishing those relationships when they're sophomores, when they're juniors. By the time they're seniors, they probably already have their mind made up. So I like the work that they're doing right now from a local standpoint. I do feel like the more CSU is able to win as a program, the more it's going to make CSU an appealing option for these local recruits. There are some things that work against CSU when it comes to this. First and foremost, I think just not being a Nike school. I know that sounds silly to probably some of the older listeners, but it makes a difference. The kids want to wear Nike. I want to wear Nike, so I don't fault them. They just make better shoes. They make cooler stuff. Under Armour has been a really good partner for CSU. I think our uniforms are fine. I think, like the hoodies, the polos, the pants, all that type of stuff, it's absolutely fine. Where it kills you is the sneaker game, and the same deal with the cleats. You can tell it's a thing because the second, and I mean the second, that the players get out of the program and they start working out on their own, they go to Nike or Jordan or Adidas or whatever. They're not wearing those team issued Under Armours anymore. I do think, especially for 17, 18-year-olds, when if it might be basically 50-50, like I do think at times Nike can be a determining factor for some of these kids and where they're going. On top of that, I do think that on game day, when the arena is full, Moby is a better atmosphere than the Coors Event Center. Part of that has to do with the fans being more invested. CSU fans as a whole are just more into CSU basketball than, for whatever reason, CU fans seem to be with CU basketball. I've been to plenty of games in there, been to CSU CU games in both multiple times. I've experienced it all. Moby is a significantly rowdier atmosphere, and I think even our Buffs guys would tell you that. Like it's a tough place to play, and when it's full and when it's rocking, it's awesome. Moby, from an aesthetic standpoint, on a Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. when it's completely empty, it's fairly old and outdated. It doesn't hit the same way, like when I'm there for practice as it does when it's full. Again, I think the atmosphere itself is great, but that's where I do think you could afford to have some renovations. And I think you need a little bit of a facelift to kind of help your cause there. Ultimately, winning is going to be the biggest selling point. Like if you're going to the tournament year after year, kids are going to come play for you. They won't care if you're Under Armour. They won't care if it's an old building. They won't. They want to play for a winner. And that's the most important thing. And again, like as long as CSU is able to continue on the trajectory that it's been on, I think they'll be just fine. Like I'm not worried about it being detrimental to a point where CSU is not going to be able to compete or something like that. But I do think those are some factors that could, benefit CSU down the line if they were able to be a Nike school. From what I've heard behind the scenes, it's unlikely. Nike kind of feels like they've got the market they need with CU, and then they're also Air Force, so they kind of feel like they've got themselves covered. We'll see, maybe Adidas or something like that. I don't know. Seems like CSU and Under Armour have a pretty good relationship, so it's probably not going to change anytime soon. But I just do think that is a bit of a factor. Like if you look at the CU facilities on a Tuesday morning, they look a lot shinier. You're in the Big 12. It's a big league. Like optically, I understand all of that. And those are all recruiting advantages for them. If you're CSU, you're selling more on the success that they've had as a program and the track record and in terms of player development and obviously the fact that they've been able to send 3 guys to the NBA in the last couple of years has just been huge for the program. And you want to continue that. We got some comments here in the Twitter chat. Miko Makar, the 2 guys they offered for B-ball are from my high school at Chaparral. We need these ballers. He also says, with so few roster spots in the transfer portal, it's tough to take a shot on a local kid if you can maybe get a slightly better player from elsewhere. Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked in the football conversation. Like you don't, as a football program, if you're CSU, you don't want to have 40 Colorado kids. Like you don't, or you're going to be UNC Greeley at that point. But you can have a foundation of it. And more than anything, it's just you want to have an opportunity to be in the mix for the guys that are going to translate. If they are going to be like that, from the state, like a Trey McBride, for instance, on the football side, you want to be able to land them. And CSU over the last 15 years or so, and that's really the best I have to gauge on, in terms of having followed the recruiting pretty closely. They've missed on some of these guys. Now, some of them, like Neek, it's worked out in the long run, but just imagine if he had come to CSU out of high school and, that 2022 NCAA tournament team has Roddy and Stevens, and we get to see those guys with Neek. Like that team would have been absolutely incredible. But more than anything, I like that they're establishing the foundation. I don't think all of a sudden CSU is going to sign 2-3 kids out of Colorado every year. They've got great roots in Texas. We've had great success in the Pacific Northwest as well as the Midwest. And I think that the staff will continue to lean on those. But if there are guys that are going to translate coming out of Colorado, you want to be on the mix. If you missed it, CSU has offered Eric Fiedler as well as Christian Williams. Both of them play for the Mountain Stars AAU program, which is an AAU basketball program based out of Utah, I believe, but it's a lot of Colorado kids on the team, a lot of Utah kids as well. I knew Christian Williams, who's class of 2027, was out of Shap. The Toyota chat's saying that Fiedler's also Shap. I thought I read that he was Regis. Regardless, 6'8" forward, Fiedler, that is, he is the class of 2026, so he'll be going into his senior year. Coming off of a great season, 24 points a game, 7.8 rebounds, 45% from the floor, 35% from 3 points. You love that he's got the size, but can step out and stretch the floor a little bit. Also an 80% free throw shooter. Really like that. His offers so far are DU in Northern Colorado. So maybe getting in on him at the right time. We'll kind of see if he blows up going into this year, but it does seem like he translates well. Williams, more of a combo guard, again, class of 2027. So coming off of his sophomore year, 6'3", 17.5 points per game this past year, about 3 assists, 4.5 boards, shot 47% from the floor, 37% from 3-point, 70% at the line. So he could use some growth there, but all encouraging numbers for somebody of that age. Again, he's still got 2 years of varsity basketball to play before he goes on to the collegiate level. I could definitely see him blowing up these next couple of years. I like that CSU is getting in on these kids early. Like, be decisive. Don't wait until, a Michigan or a whoever, a Kansas State is going to come around and start sniffing you got to establish those relationships right off the bat. And I'm intrigued with what this staff is doing from a local recruiting standpoint. And I hope to see it be fruitful for CSU in the coming years. All right, we're going to get into the concept of Mr. Nugget, talk about who that could be for CSU basketball, who that could be for CSU football as well. Keep the questions, keep the comments rolling. I'll get to as many as I can. We're going to shout out a couple of our other partners here. With Empire Today, you're going to get the best option around for new flooring. Just like your home team needs home court advantage, you need your home floor advantage, and Empire Today can help you get it. They've got knowledgeable people. They don't try and overwhelm you with aisles and aisles of options and choices and substitutes. I've talked about this a lot, with Empire being a longtime partner of ours, but what I love about them is they're not trying to overwhelm you. They're not trying to, throw you all these different substitutes. They're just trying to show you the best of the best. And that's not necessarily going to be the cheapest option on the market, but anybody that's trying to sell you the cheapest flooring around, you got to ask yourself, is that really the type of flooring you want to put in your home? This is a long-term investment. You want to make sure that you do it right. What's awesome about Empire Today is with their virtual floor designer, you can see how any floor will look with your space. Just snap a picture, boom. You can do it all online. Again, just being able to do it from home and not having to go to some big box store and deal with people and their obliviousness and their cart blocking the aisles and just everything we hate about going places. Schedule a free in-home estimate today because some things are just better at home. DNVR listeners can get a $350 discount when they use the promo code DNVR. You heard that right, $350 discount with the code DNVR. Restrictions to apply. Visit EmpireToday/DNVR for full details. I also want to talk to you guys about the Hall of Fame app. This is an app that you really need if you're into sports betting. If you want to be locked in, if you want to have the best information available, you want to check out Hall of Fame. This isn't some group chat with your buddies where, I've got the lock of the week, who's riding with me? This is full on analytical. This is using all of the information available, advanced stats, historical data, and all kinds of really cool, powerful tools to help you bet smarter. The app is built for the everyday sports fan. It's really easy and intuitive to use. I will credit it. I was a little bit worried kind of like getting into this. Is this something that's going to be super overwhelming for me? Some of that sports betting stuff can be, but the Hall of Fame app is awesome. It's a great way to just get the best bets possible. And what's cool is you can, design the bets you want and find the value you want through Hall of Fame. And then you can sync it up automatically with, DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever you use. It's just a great way to get the best information possible. It gives you beautiful charts, clean visuals, real insight, not hype. They believe anything the books know, you should know too, because parlays don't have to be dumb bets with Hall of Fame. They aren't. With a 4.9 rating in the App Store and over 6,000 five-star reviews, it's safe to say Hall of Fame has already developed a great reputation and helped a lot of people bet smarter. For limited time only, our listeners not only can get a 7-day free trial, but they also get 50% off their first month when they use the code DNVR at checkout. All you got to do is download the Hall of Fame app on iOS or Android. Visit hofbets.com, enter the code DNVR, and you are all set. All right. We're going to get into, after this, we're going to talk which CSU football players historically would be fun representatives for the Olympic flag football thing that's, starting now. I know it's been a thing, but now that NFL players are going to get involved, it's really going to skyrocket, I think. But I did want to get into this concept of Mr. Nugget. I love it. It was coined by DNVR, which is really cool because now anytime you watch a national broadcast, when Aaron Gordon gets referenced, it's Mr. Nugget this, Mr. Nugget that. And Mr. Nugget is something that multiple guys have been over the years. I think we're going to kind of retire it with AG because I don't think anybody's going to be able to embody that better than him. But it's people like Gary Harris, it's people like Monte Morris, and they're not the superstars. They're not the Nikola Jokic's of the world. Even Jamal Murray might be a little bit too high profile as of now, although, with how he plays sometimes, maybe he could be in the conversation. But it's it's about more than just like racking up stats. It's about more than status. I think you need to have tenure, especially because we're going to compare collegiate to pros. Like, I don't think it can be a one and done. It's got to be somebody who's somewhat synonymous with the team. You've got to have that established presence, but you've also got to be kind of like the ultimate teammate. Like, what makes Aaron Gordon so great is he's a former lottery pick who was the guy in Orlando. He was the face of the franchise, and they didn't do anything. They didn't win. He comes to Denver. He knows he's not going to be the face of the team. You've got Nikola Jokic. You've got Jamal Murray. You've got guys that are well established, but he just puts his head down and he does all the dirty work. He's going to bust his ass defensively. He's going to rim run. He's going to get offensive rebounds. His improvement as a shooter was significant this past year. He's truly underrated in his role, and he could be a bigger deal somewhere else, but he chooses to be a Nugget because, one, playing alongside Jokic is the best way to optimize your own game. Like, it's not going to get any easier than playing next to that guy, but like, he wants to win with this group, and he's really self-aware, understands that this is the best position he's ever been in his career, and he does everything that he can to help the team win. Like, he's the type of guy that just embodies the spirit of what you would want your team to be. Like, if you could have 10 guys with that mentality, you're probably going to be really hard to beat. You need people to fill these types of roles to be successful at any level. I think glue guy is maybe a little bit too oversimplified for what Aaron Gordon is, because I think he's better than that. Like, I don't think it's like I don't know, Bruce Brown or something like that, but I do think that like there is the glue guy mentality with maybe a little bit higher ceiling athletically, if that makes sense. With all that in mind, I was kind of going through the rosters for CSU basketball, for CSU football over the years, and I was trying to think to myself, who is that? Who would be Mr. Ram? And with basketball, I think it's really easy for these past couple of years. It's Jalen Lake. Like, again, this isn't going to be a David Roddy. It's not going to be a Neat Clifford or Isaiah, something like that. It's somebody who is certainly significant. You can't say that Jalen Lake was not a significant player. I mean, hit multiple game winners over his career. He's the winningest player in program history. 3 NCAA tournaments. Nobody else in CSU basketball history has been able to say that. Played in 124 games, so he's got that longevity. 61 starts. You can point to the selflessness. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, so I don't want to get too repetitive, but I just have so much respect and admiration for Jalen Lake's career because I think he's underrated with what he brought to the table. I think he's, a great on-ball defender, great three-point shooter. I think his game grew a lot over the years in terms of putting the ball on the floor and attacking, with some of those little floaters and stuff like that. But I just think the selflessness and the willingness to put CSU and what was best for the team over, maybe what was the best option for Jalen Lake to rack up a bunch of stats and have it be about him. I have so much respect for him. 902 career points, again, 3 NCAA tournament appearances, hit game-winning shots in all those runs. He scored, 16 points against CU in that awesome game in FOCO a couple years back with like a broken finger. Like, the dude is just tough as nails, completely selfless, and pretty dang good. Like, I think if you're pointing to anybody that would be Mr. Ram for CSU men's basketball in these last couple of years, I don't even really think there's a debate about who that would be. It would be Jalen Lake. We've got some comments here. A couple of people shouting out Pierce Hornung. I have him on my list. 799 career rebounds, 727 points. He was the Mountain West Sixth Man of the Year at one point. Certainly embodies the team first mentality and like the whole concept of, if I had 12 players with a motor like Pierce Hornung that were willing to dive for every loose ball, that were willing to just do the dirty work, that were going to sacrifice whatever, might take an elbow here or something like that. They're just going to do whatever it takes to win. And Pierce Hornung, he wasn't the star of those teams. Especially you bring over Colton Iverson and even like Wes Eichmeyer and Dorian Green and all those great guards they had on the team. Like, those are probably the bigger household names. But if you were a Ram fan during that Tim Miles era and you were locked in, you knew that Pierce Hornung was the heartbeat of that team. And it would just be so funny because he'd be like 6'7", maybe 6'8" in shoes, probably more like 6'6", honestly. But he'd just be out there out rebounding like legit 7-footers. And you got to remember too, New Mexico, UNLV, San Diego State, like those were some really good teams with really significant athletes. And he would basically just be out there out hustling everybody. And I think Pierce Hornung is a great example of that. And then kind of filling in the gaps there, we threw out Jalen Lake, we threw out Pierce Hornung. In between those two guys, I would point to Nico Carvacho. Now, I do think Nico is borderline because he's maybe a little too significant in terms of what his status was. Like he was the star of that team. But those teams were so bad. And I think Nico fills this role more than anything because of his loyalty and because the fact that he was willing to sacrifice. Like in his senior year, Nico could have gone to Oklahoma. Ole Miss, I know, had some interest in him. Tim Miles really wanted to bring him over to Nebraska, I think, in his last year there. So like he very easily could have transferred up, and instead he chose to stick around and help Medved lay the foundation. By the time he left, 132 career games, 129 starts, over 1,400 points, almost 1,300 rebounds, I believe. Should have double checked this, but I believe that when he left CSU, he was the Mountain West all-time leader in both rebounds and double-doubles. So a really significant career, and maybe objectively a little bit too good, I guess, to fill this role perfectly. But I don't like phrasing it that way because then it makes it seem like I'm diminishing Jalen Lake or Pierce Hornung. And I think those guys were terrific basketball players, but I just think more in terms of the status that they have within the league, that Nico was maybe a little bit too prominent, if that makes sense. But I just think his mentality, his selflessness, the fact that he stayed loyal to CSU during a time when it was not easy to do so, I think he would be the guy that I would classify as the Mr. Ram in between Jalen Lake and Pierce Hornung. Looking at it on the football side, there are a couple of different options I think you could throw to. And again, like I don't think this can be Braden Fowler-Nicolosi. I don't think it can be the quarterback because that's too much status. Like I don't think it can be Torrey Horton. Like we all knew that dude was a superstar. I do think Henry Blackburn is a really good example of what this would be. A Colorado kid, comes to CSU, earns his way onto the field early, is a significant contributor for 5 years in the program, 272 career tackles, 5 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. So a very productive player, but a player who was often overshadowed even by his running mate, Jack Howell. Jack Howell just had so much attention coming into the program with his dad being a legend at CSU. Like the expectations for Howell from day one were so high that I think it was going to be hard for him to even live up to it. And then things only got like more intense after that freshman year where he flashed early. And again, I just think people built him up into something that was going to be hard to live up to. And I think he was a very productive football player. I thought he was a great team captain, great leader. I'm so thankful that I got to cover Jack Howell, and I had a lot of fun watching him over the years. But I think at times he would get like too much of the glory when, in my opinion, the last 2 years, Henry Blackburn was the more consistent player. And that's not, again, not trying to put anybody down or anything like that. I just felt like Henry was overshadowed and undervalued. I think that he's somebody who has an outside chance to maybe land in an NFL roster for a little bit. Probably more like a practice squad guy, if anything, but underrated in terms of his production, but also just like the mentality that he had, being such a passionate player. God, coming downhill, he was a freaking freight train. I know there was so much drama with him and the Travis Hunter shit, but like he was never a malicious individual. There was never intent to hurt Travis Hunter. That was a physical game between rivals, and it was a play that deserved a penalty. Don't get me wrong, and it got flagged, rightfully so. But he was somebody who set the tone, and like we praise guys for that all the time. And I just felt like he was kind of the victim of a little bit of bad luck. Like, was it a borderline hit that deserved a flag? Without a doubt. But was it some like malicious plan to try and hurt Travis Hunter or something like that? No, it wasn't. And I've said it a million times now, but if you don't want that type of game, maybe don't run your mouth so much pregame. Like I was on the sidelines and Shadur's coming over. They're throwing balls in CSU's warmup. They almost started a fight at midfield. They're talking shit. And then, the minute that somebody punches back, all of a sudden it was, oh, we're the victims and it's everybody against CU and you're trying to hurt our best players and all this whiny crybaby shit. And it was just ridiculous how over dramatic all the takes were. The whole thing got super gross really quickly when it just would have been another play. Like if you grew up with the Rocky Mountain Showdown in the early 2000s, that's what this was. We used to celebrate that intensity. We used to applaud guys that did it. And I don't know. We're getting off track now, but I just feel bad for everything that Henry had to go through for a freaking football play. Like, yeah, he deserved a flag, but it was not some crazy example of something that was out of the norm or this malicious intent to injure somebody or anything like that. All of that was just so silly. And the fact that he was able to overcome all of that, because it was a circus, guys. Like, you don't even understand the amount of threats and messages. Like, he still has to be private on all his socials because of the Dion cult and the stuff that they come at him. I had people coming at me, because I defended him. Like, it was such a circus, and I'm glad that he at least got to experience a couple of rivalry wins his senior year. The bowl game sucked, but I do look back on the fact that he and Howell got to experience it, and it makes me happy. Same thing with Torrey, even though he couldn't play, obviously, because he was hurt. But yeah, I think Henry Blackburn would be the Mr. Ram for CSU football, at least this iteration. Some other examples, and again, like these aren't like the Rashard Higgins of the world. I think Barry Wesley would have been a great example of this. Somebody who walked on in 2017 was starting by 2018. Between 2018 and 2021, I believe he took live game reps at all 5 offensive line positions, started at both tackles, started at both guards, and I think he got some reps at center in there in between as well. Just did everything the right way. And another guy who unfortunately went through a really traumatic experience at CSU, obviously, with the incident off the field, and it had nothing to do with him doing the wrong things. It had to do with a racist old man, and it was, thank God that wasn't a tragedy. We're not going to go into all the details of that. You can Google it if you're looking for it. But Barry was somebody that I've actually known basically his entire life. He and my younger brother played youth football together. They played baseball together. They were in choir together in high school. And I think that just kind of sums up like the type of personality that Barry has. He was just such a kind soul, such a hard worker. And I'll be honest, like, I never believed Barry Wesley would have a path to the playing field coming out of high school. And the fact that he was a starter by his redshirt freshman year, that just has to do with his mentality and how hard he worked. Because he was not that guy coming out of high school. He's kind of a late bloomer. And it obviously all worked out pretty well for him. But I just love that dude, a walk on, somebody who starts all 5 positions in the offensive line, which is obviously a position group that inherently isn't going to be in the spotlight like the receivers, even, like a defensive line or star corner or something like that. The guys in the trenches, they never get the love they deserve. Same reason I would throw Weston Richburg in there, although again, his status might be a little bit too significant as a, second round pick or whatever he was. Crockett Gilmore, I would throw in that as well. Statistically speaking, he's not up there with Trey or even like Kevon Cartwright or Corey Sperry or Dreesen or McGregor, there have been so many great tight ends that have come through the program over the years when you start listing them all out. But Crockett was just that guy who was willing to block all day long, and maybe he would finish the game with 2 catches for 13 yards, but he was going to drop his shoulder and run through somebody on that catch. He was just going to do whatever was necessary to help CSU win. And when I think back to those McElwain years, like a guy like Crockett is definitely in the conversation. CD6 in the Toyota chat says Kyle Bell. Another great example, especially post-injury Kyle Bell. Kyle was a significant recruit coming out of high school. Like early on in his career, man, he was a stud. If he didn't get hurt, I think he would have had an outside chance at the NFL. But yeah, I think those are kind of the perfect examples here. We do need to take one last break, I think, or did we get them all? First man, losing team. Yes, we do. We got to do one last break, and then we will get into some flag football stuff. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. Life's going to test you. Getting worked up rarely helps anything. Have to deal with some HVAC issues in the new house. Talk about, hasn't been the best 7 days or so, but you know, I've learned you got to do the little things to help you deal with it. Yard work, take deep breaths. Not a yoga guy, but I'm sure it'd be great. More of a get in the sun and feel the dirt between my fingers and get a sweat going. And after that, I'm going to kick back. I'm going to crack open an ice cold Coors Light, cold and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. When the mountains turn blue, you know the deal. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also want to talk to you about Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails, hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Toyota offers 17 models, available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. They've got 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Shout out Toyota. Let's go places. All right. Before we get out of here, I did want to throw out some examples of CSU football players historically that would have made good options to compete in the Olympics in flag football. That's obviously a new thing, so these guys wouldn't have had that chance back in the day. But I was just kind of going through it. It's a 10-person roster from what I've been able to find. You play 5-on-5. And I was trying to think of, like, are there certain body frames that would be more conducive to flag football? If you're tall and lanky, you can take those long strides. You also have more to grab at. I wonder if it would be better to be like short and stocky. Obviously, you've got to have some lateral mobility. You've got to have agility. You've got to be fast and quick. But the ability to make people miss in the open field and the ability to cover a lot of ground were kind of the two things that I emphasize the most. I think our quarterback, if we were making a flag football team, Bradley Van Pelt. I mean, obviously, dual threat, it's what he did. I will say, taking the ability to drop the shoulder, throw a stiff arm out of the mix, does that limit his effectiveness? Maybe a little bit. But I think he would have been athletic enough to be solid at this. I would throw Todd Centeio into that conversation as well. I think he's somebody who very easily could be a successful flag football player. I mean, the dual threat ability, when they would open the offense up a little bit and let him run around, give him some space, that's when he was at his most effectiveness. He showed that at James Madison as well after he ultimately left CSU. So those are the only quarterbacks that really come to mind. Moses could run around a little bit, but I don't know if I would classify him as a true dual threat quarterback. Garrett Grayson, before he got injured, maybe could have been in that mix. Was more of a pocket passer by the end, but early on in his career, he was kind of billed as that dual threat guy, somebody who could make some stuff happen with his legs. So I think BVP and Centeio are the easy options at receiver. Again, like, I'm not really thinking of a Preston Williams or a Warren Jackson type big, great receivers. Without the physicality, though, I think they lose their effectiveness in flag football. So I was going for more guys who are going to be able to rack up yards after the catch, guys who are dangerous in the open field, and guys who are just burners. So Torrey Horton, great option of somebody who would, be a great flag football player. Rashard Higgins, his ability to make guys miss in the open field was next level. Even somebody like BC Johnson or like a Joe Hansley. Joe Hansley, I feel like maybe has the most underrated claim to being on this team. He wasn't the biggest guy, wasn't the fastest guy, but he was he ran well, he was quick, and he could make guys miss. Like the ability to make guys miss in the open field was one of his specialties. He and BC too would be great teammates, like grinders. Maybe they wouldn't be the stars of the team, but they do the little work. BC was a safety in high school too, so I think he'd have the ability to help you on the defensive side. Somebody in the Toyota chat here says Dexter Wynn. I've got him on my list as well. I think he would have been perfect for flag football. This is an old school response, but Jack Christensen. I mean, he was Devin Hester in the NFL before that was a thing. They had to change the kick return rules for him. NFL Hall of Famer. Greg Myers, Thorpe winner, somebody who returned kicks, also as safety. You want guys that are going to be able to run well, but are also going to be able to cover some ground sideline to sideline, like who are laterally, moving well as well. A lot of wells in there. Capri Bibbs, Dalen Dawkins come to mind. Damon Washington, I think old school. I think he would be the old school running back. You're not going to go with like a guard Charles Johnson who didn't have the pure speed. Cecil the Diesel, more of a run through you type running back than make you miss. Same thing with like a Kevin McDougal. I think Damon Washington and Capri would probably be my choices, although Dalen and Marvin Kinsey, just because of the speed that they bring to the table, probably underrated choices for the team. I did put Trey McBride on there. I know taking the physicality out of the equation would limit his effectiveness for sure. But he's got great hands. I think he's an underrated athlete with how he's able to move. So I gave out about 15 names there. If I could only limit it to 10, I'm going BVP's our quarterback. He's running things. We're going 1 QB. If we sub, I will have somebody like Torrey Horton do it, and he can just pitch it. Rashard Higgins, Joe Hansley, Capri, Damon Washington, and then we're going to bring Jack Christensen, Dexter Wynn, and Greg Myers all into the mix because you need ball carriers, but you need guys that are going to get stops for you too. And those guys all can run really well. So that's who would be my flag football team. We'll see what happens though this year. We've got some Buffs fans in the Toyota chat, some being nice, some less so. But Livy says, "Go Buffs, CSU. I got y'all at 8 wins this year. No hates." I appreciate that. We can have a little bit of fun banter, a little bit of back and forth. I'm really interested to see what happens in Boulder this year in the post-Shedeur, post-Travis Hunter era. Salter's a nice addition at quarterback. I know they signed the Juju or whatever his name is, the high school kid as well. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for today's show. I know it was kind of random, classic off-season content. Before we get out of here, maybe I'll get into this a little bit more on the next show. I did put together a summer to-do list that I have for Northern Colorado, just some things I'd like to do. I'm living closer to Loveland these days than actually in like Old Town or the heart of Fort Collins. So I want to explore it a little bit. If you've got some recommendations in terms of places to eat, places to go in the Loveland area, Fort Collins, Windsor, really all of the above, I'm open to it. I'm going to try and do some exploring. Maybe this is going to be something I shouldn't admit publicly, but I've still never been to the Buc-ee's off I-25. I don't know if it lives up to the hype or not. I inherently am a little bit skeptical. I don't know. I just don't see how it can be all that great. I'm sure it's a very nice gas station. I'm sure I know the bathrooms are really clean. That's what they're known for. I'm more of a Maverick man. At least I have been historically. You got a lot of those on the Western Slope where I spend a lot of time. They never have steered me wrong, and you get all the convenience without all of the chaos or the hassle. I think that's what's ultimately kept me away from Buc-ee's, is that it just seems like it's going to be a process. Like there's always so many people in there. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it for a gas station, but I got to experience it, right? I got to try the brisket and the banana pudding or whatever and the fudge and all the things I see people talk about all the time. I got people in the Toyota chat saying I got to check it out. So I'm going to do it. Maybe we'll document that, make it a little vlog experience. J Mike hits Buc-ee's for the first time. We'll get into some of that other stuff on my NoCo summer to-do list on Friday. We'll be going live 10 a.m. Same as usual. Much love to everybody in Ram Nation. Much love to everybody rocking with us live this morning. Couldn't do any of this without you. Shout out to our guy Kale, super producer, making all this happen. Couldn't do this show without him. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.